When I was around 13 years old, my parents went out for the evening, leaving me alone at home with our dog Max. It wasn't a big deal. I'd stayed home plenty of times before, and I actually kind of liked having the place to myself. After dinner, I settled into the couch, wrapped up in a blanket, and put on a movie. Max was stretched out nearby, half asleep. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, but nothing felt wrong. Until the phone rang. I paused the movie and picked up the landline, expecting it to be my mom checking in. But instead of her voice, all I heard was static. And then, faintly, a whisper. It said my name, Emily. It was so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. Then it repeated, over and over, Emily, Emily. I froze. The voice didn't sound familiar at all. Slow, raspy, like someone trying not to be heard. I hung up right away. My heart was racing, but I told myself it had to be some kind of prank or weird interference. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. I looked at the caller ID and saw something that made my stomach drop. It was our own number calling. Terrified, I let it ring a few times before picking it up. This time, there was no whispering, no static, just breathing. Heavy, slow, unsettling breathing. Like someone was standing just on the other side of the wall holding the phone. I slammed it down and immediately locked every window and door in the house. Max jumped up, sensing something was wrong, and started growling toward the back door. I didn't want to call my parents and scare them, so I rang our neighbor across the street. He came over within minutes and walked around the outside of the house, even checking the backyard. Nothing. No signs of anyone, but the phone rang again while he was there. I didn't answer it. I unplugged it. When my parents came home later, I told them everything. They brushed it off, said it was probably just a cross line or a technical glitch. But I know what I heard. And what still chills me to this day is how that voice knew my name. It wasn't just whispering it. It was calling to me. This happened when I was around 11 years old. My parents had gone out for dinner and left me home alone. It wasn't the first time. I had snacks, cartoons, and a list of emergency numbers. Everything was fine. At least, it started that way. After watching a few episodes of my favorite show, I got up to use the bathroom. The hallway outside my room was pitch black since I hadn't turned on any lights. I wasn't scared of the dark though, so I casually stepped into the hallway and started walking. But as I passed the guest room, I froze. The door, which was usually shut, was wide open, and inside was a man. He was just standing there, completely still in the middle of the room. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. He wasn't moving, not talking, just staring straight ahead. I quietly backed into my room, locked the door, and called my dad. "Dad," I whispered, shaking, "there's someone in the house." He told me to hang up and call 911 right away, so I did. The dispatchers stayed on the line with me while officers were sent over. I stayed in my room, clutching a baseball bat, listening for any sounds outside my door. Within minutes, I heard pounding footsteps downstairs and voices shouting, "Police!" They searched the house and found no one. No open windows, no signs of forced entry, nothing was stolen. The guest room door was closed again. They told my parents it might have been a stress reaction, or maybe I had imagined it. But I know what I saw. There was a man standing in that room, and for years after that, I never walked down that hallway without the lights on. I was 16 when this happened. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, and I stayed behind to look after the house. I actually liked being alone. It meant I could stay up late, eat junk food, and have the TV all to myself. The first night went smoothly. I made popcorn, binge-watched some horror movies, and eventually dozed off on the couch. But on the second night, things changed. It was around midnight when I started hearing it. Scratching, faint at first, like something brushing against a wall. I muted the TV and listened closely. It was coming from the basement. Our basement door was in the kitchen, and it was always locked at night, so I figured maybe it was mice or something small. I didn't feel like investigating, so I tried to ignore it. But then it got louder. It wasn't just scratching anymore. It was dragging, slow, heavy scraping sounds, like furniture being moved across concrete. I walked into the kitchen and stood by the basement door, just listening. Then, clear as day, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs from below. They stopped right at the door. My entire body went cold. I didn't know what to do, so I grabbed a knife from the drawer and ran into the living room. I called my neighbor, who was a retired cop. He told me to stay put and that he'd be right over. 5 minutes later, he arrived and went down into the basement with his flashlight. It was empty. Nothing had been moved. Nothing was down there. But the strangest part, the deadbolt on the basement door was still locked. No one could have been in there unless they were already inside before I locked it. That was the last night I stayed home alone for a long, long time. This happened when I was around 14. My parents were working late, and I was alone in the house one chilly winter night. I had just finished dinner and was watching videos in my room, curled up in bed with a blanket. Our backyard backed up to a wooded area, and my bedroom window faced it. I usually kept the curtains shut, but that night, I'd forgotten to close them. I didn't really notice until I looked up from my phone and caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Something or someone was standing just beyond the tree line. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shadows, or maybe a deer. But then it moved. Not like an animal, like a person. It stepped forward slowly, just enough to be partially lit by the porch light. Tall, thin, completely still. I couldn't make out any features, but I knew instantly it was human. I stared in frozen silence. Then it took another step. I jumped up, backed away from the window, and shut the curtains as fast as I could. My heart was pounding, but I didn't want to overreact. I thought maybe it was someone passing through or some kind of prank. Still, I locked the window and checked all the doors, just in case. About 10 minutes later, I heard a tap. Not at the front door, not at the back door, at my bedroom window. I didn't move. I didn't breathe, just stood there, barely peeking through the edge of the curtain. He was right there, close enough that I could see his breath fogging up the glass. He wasn't knocking, just tapping with one finger. Tap, tap, tap. I called the police immediately. I didn't even wait to explain. I just gave them my address and told them someone was outside my window. The tapping stopped before the cops arrived. They searched the yard, the woods, the nearby street. Nothing. No footprints. No sign anyone had even been there. But I know what I saw. And now, I always make sure those curtains are closed tight before the sun goes down. When I was 12, my parents went out to a party and left me home alone for the night. It was a weekend, and I was excited to stay up late watching movies and eating junk food. Nothing seemed unusual, just another quiet evening. Around 11 p.m., I was getting ready for bed. I had just turned off the TV and was brushing my teeth when I heard a soft creak from upstairs. It came from my bedroom. I froze. The house had old wooden floors, so noises weren't exactly rare. But this sounded different, like someone had stepped inside my room. I turned off the bathroom light and stood still, listening. Silence. Slowly, I crept toward the stairs, calling out, "Hello?" Of course, there was no answer. I made my way up, trying to convince myself it was nothing. I peeked into my room, flipped on the light, and everything looked normal, except for one thing. My closet door, which I always kept shut, was slightly open. I didn't remember leaving it that way, and the more I stared at it, the more certain I was. It had been shut tight before. I walked over and gently pushed it open. Nothing. Just clothes, boxes, and the usual mess of a 12-year-old's room. Still, I didn't sleep well that night. A couple of weeks later, it happened again. This time, it was broad daylight. I'd come home from school, went up to my room, and again, my closet door was open. That's when I started stacking things in front of it at night. Shoes, laundry baskets, anything to keep it sealed shut. One morning, I woke up to find everything I'd stacked in front of it moved, and the door wide open. I never saw anyone, never heard a voice, but from that point on, I never felt alone in that house again. And to this day, closets make me uncomfortable in a way I can't explain. I was 17 at the time, home alone while my parents were out of town for the weekend. It wasn't a big deal. I'd stayed on my own plenty of times, and honestly, I enjoyed the freedom. That night, I stayed up late watching TV and playing games. Around 2:30 a.m., I finally decided to call it a night. I brushed my teeth, turned off all the lights downstairs, and headed to bed. I just started to doze off when I heard it. A knock. Not loud, just 3 soft, deliberate taps. I sat up, confused. It had come from the front door. I checked my phone, 3:02 a.m. Who would be knocking at this hour? I stayed still, hoping it was just my imagination. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. I crept out of bed and made my way downstairs. All the lights were still off. I peeked through the peephole and saw nothing. No one on the porch. No movement. Just the porch light flickering slightly from the breeze. Then I noticed something. The doorknob was turning slowly, like someone on the other side was trying it, testing it. My heart dropped. I backed away and ran to the kitchen to grab my phone. As I started to dial 911, I heard footsteps on the porch. Heavy ones. They moved away from the door, then around the side of the house. I rushed upstairs to my room and locked the door, phone in hand. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They searched the area and didn't find anything. No footprints, no damage to the door. Nothing suspicious, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat there in the dark, holding a baseball bat, waiting for another knock that thankfully never came. Whoever it was, they didn't want to break in. They wanted to see if I'd open the door. What do you think? I was 10 years old when this happened, and it still gives me chills just thinking about it. My parents had gone out for a late dinner, and I was left in the care of my older brother. He was 16 at the time, and mostly just locked himself in his room playing games. I was in the living room, watching cartoons with the lights off, except for the glow from the screen. Everything was quiet, peaceful, until I felt the urge to look at the big front window behind me. At first I thought I saw movement, just a shadow, but when I looked closer, I froze. There was a man standing outside. He was pressed up against the glass, face barely visible in the reflection of the TV light. His eyes were wide. He wasn't moving, just staring straight into the room, right at me. I screamed. My brother came rushing down the stairs, but by the time he flipped on the lights and looked out the window, the man was gone. We checked the front porch. Nothing, but that wasn't the worst part. Later that night, while trying to fall asleep, I couldn't shake the image of that face, so I got up to check the locks on the doors one more time, and when I peeked out the front window, the man was back, standing in the exact same spot. I didn't scream this time. I just dropped to the floor and crawled backward into the hallway, then ran and pounded on my brother's door. He called the police right away. They came within minutes, searched the entire street, even went door to door, asking neighbors if they'd seen anything. Nobody had. To this day, I don't know who he was or how long he'd been standing there before I noticed. But every time I walk past a window at night, I still catch myself checking the glass, just in case someone's staring back. If you enjoyed these chilling tales and want more true horror stories from the shadows, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Hauntica, and tap the bell icon so you never miss what's lurking next. Your support helps keep the darkness alive and the stories coming.